There comes a moment in every life, often quiet and invisible to others, where the world you have been living in begins to feel unbearably small, where the masks you've worn for years start to crack under the weight of their own falseness, and where the person you pretended to be can no longer protect the person you secretly are. And in that moment, perhaps right now for you, a single decision silently waits. A decision so subtle you might overlook it, yet so powerful it could rewrite the entire story of who you will become. Think about this for a moment. How many times in your life have you walked away from your own reflection, not because you didn't have time to look, but because you were afraid of what it might reveal? Afraid of how much of your life is shaped, not by your conscious choices, but by the parts of yourself you refuse to face. Carl Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And if you let that sentence echo inside you for long enough, you might begin to hear how much of your story has not been written by you at all, but by fears you inherited, expectations. You absorbed identities you never questioned, and wounds you learned to hide so well you forgot they were still there. But es what no one tells you. There is a decision so life-altering that everything before it becomes the life you survived, and everything after it becomes the life you chose. And that decision is the one most people spend their entire lives avoiding: the decision to face yourself, not the perfectly edited version of you, not the version you show to strangers or friends, or the mirror at just the right angle, but the real you, the parts you're proud of, the parts you're ashamed of, the parts you've buried so deeply that meeting them again would feel like meeting a stranger wearing your face. Søren Kierkegaard believed that despair was the refusal to become oneself, the quiet suffering that grows when a person hides from their own truth. And perhaps your life has carried that same sense of unfinished being, the sense that something essential is missing, not because destiny forgot to give it to you, but because you have not yet dared to claim it. So now ask yourself, what would happen if, instead of running from the parts of you that hurt, you turned toward them, looked them in the eye, and said, "I'm ready to understand you"? What would happen if, instead of distracting yourself from your fears, you learn to listen to them until they finally reveal what they've been guarding all this time? What would happen if you made the one decision that changes everything? The decision to stop escaping and start becoming, because the truth is that most people are not broken. They are simply divided, split between who they are and who they pretend to be, trapped between a self that wants to evolve and a self that wants to stay safe. And until that division is healed, no amount of motivation, achievement, or positive thinking can offer real transformation. This is why Viktor Frankl, even while enduring the unendurable, understood something astonishing about human beings: that life is not primarily a search for pleasure or success, or even happiness, but a search for meaning, and meaning often begins in the very places we least want to look. Perhaps this is why the story of your life feels stuck or repetitive or strangely hollow, not because you lack strength or potential, but because the deeper meaning you're searching for cannot be found outside of you, not until you face what is unresolved within you. Here is the turning point, the place where your story can change. The moment you decide to stop asking the world to reflect who you want to be, and instead ask yourself whether you've been honest about who you truly are. Let these words settle. Your life does not change when you wish for a different past, or when you fantasize about a different future. Your life changes when you make a single, courageous decision in the present. The decision to meet yourself fully, without fear, without denial, without running. But here is what no one tells you. Facing yourself is not a dramatic moment of cinematic revelation. It is a slow, patient, intimate process, a journey into the depths of your own psyche where you uncover the stories they've been repeating, the beliefs you've been carrying, and the wounds you've been protecting for far too long. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of yourself you hide because you think they make you unworthy. Yet, ironically, the moment you stop hiding them is the moment they lose their power and begin to transform. Alan Watts described it differently. He said that we are like actors who have forgotten we are playing a role, mistaking the mask for the face, and only when we become aware of the performance can we choose to step out of it. And while their language differed, they pointed to the same truth. Identity is not something you inherit. It is something you confront, something you shape, something you claim through awareness. So think about this for a moment. What if the version of you that feels lost is not failing, but being invited to awaken? What if the chaos you feel is not punishment, but transition, the collapse of an identity that no longer fits you? What if your discomfort is the signal that you are standing at the threshold of a new story? Because the story you are living right now may not be the story that belongs to you. It might be the story. Your parents carry the story. Society expects the story. Fear demands the story. Comfort seduces you into repeating, or the story silence chooses when you refuse to speak. But the one story that will rewrite everything, the one story that will change your future, begins the moment you decide to stop living someone else. Script. Here's what most people never realize. You don't need to know how your story ends in order to begin rewriting it. You only need to choose the direction of the next sentence. And that sentence starts with a decision to face yourself. It begins when you say, "I will no longer hide from the truth of who I am," even if that truth is messy or painful or unfamiliar. It begins when you accept that healing is not the erasing of your past, but the integration of it. It begins when you understand that your pain isn't a verdict. It's information, a message, a doorway. Now ask yourself, what have you avoided long enough? What emotion have you stuffed down until it turned into numb? What desire have you silenced because you feared it would change everything? What truth have you buried because it didn't fit the life you were taught to want? This is the psychological buildup, the understanding that every identity has cracks, and it is through those cracks that awareness enters. Viktor Frankl taught that even when everything is taken from us, we still retain one final freedom, the freedom to choose our attitude, our meaning, our response. And it is in this freedom that your new story begins. Not with control, but with responsibility. Not with certainty, but with awareness. And this awareness is what turns the unconscious into the conscious, the hidden into the known, the avoided into the integrated. Suddenly you begin to see that your fears are younger versions of you asking for protection, not enemies demanding defeat. You begin to see that your patterns were once coping strategies, not flaws. You begin to see that the parts of yourself you reject are simply parts waiting to be understood. This is where the transformation happens. When understanding replaces judgment, when curiosity replaces avoidance, when compassion replaces shame. And this is why facing yourself is the most powerful decision you will ever make. Because the moment you stop running is the moment your past stops chasing you. The moment you turn inward is the moment your life begins to align with something deeper than fear, something wiser, something authentic, something that feels like the truth. So here is the invitation. Stand in the quiet space where your old self is dissolving. And instead of reaching for distractions or patterns or escape routes, reach for awareness. Because the decision to face yourself is the decision that rewrites every chapter that comes after it. It is the decision that says, I am done abandoning myself. I am done living a life that is too small for who I am becoming. I am done pretending that I don't feel what I feel. I am done hiding from my own depth. And when you make that decision, truly make it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to reclaim the parts of you that were lost. You begin to heal the wounds you thought were permanent. You begin to access a strength you never knew you had. You begin to write a story that feels alive, that feels meaningful, that feels like it belongs to you. Because transformation doesn't begin with a plan or a goal or a perfect mindset. Transformation begins with a choice, the choice to face yourself. And if you can make that one decision with honesty and courage and patience, then the story of who you are will not just change, it will expand, deepen, evolve, and unfold into something far more extraordinary than the life you've been trying to outrun. So take a breath. Feel the weight of everything you've carried. Feel the truth of everything you've avoided. And then, with all the gentleness you can muster, speak the words that begin every real transformation. I'm ready to meet myself. Because that is the moment your life begins again.